What a 2022 Formula One season it has been for Ferrari. The question I have, with Red Bull winning the title, with Max Verstappen winning the Drivers' Championship, what next is for Ferrari? And it's been quite a memorable season, to be fair. I mean, they came out of the season one of the favourites, out the blocks flying. They drew first blood, and they were really a team that you could say, do you know what? There is a title challenge on this year for the Scuderia and for the Tifosi back in Italy as well. And yet, you know, when you sort of look at the whole scope of everything, you know, Red Bull weren't having a great time at the start of the season. Mercedes, I mean, what on earth happened to Mercedes? We have no idea. So the question I then ask is, well, what on earth happened? Why has Ferrari fallen the way it's fallen? And what next for Ferrari? What does this mean for the team going forward? Can they bounce back and really give Red Bull a real challenge this season, next season? Mercedes as well, can they give them a challenge? Because honestly, it's if you're a Ferrari fan, you must be thinking, what on earth do we need to do? Remember, this is a team that hasn't won silverware in years, okay, in decades, and that's not good enough for Ferrari. So let's get into it. Let's talk about what on earth is going on. Let's talk about the scope of the season, and then we have to discuss where do they go from here. Now, as I said, they drew first blood. They had a 1-2 finish in Bahrain, if you remember. At the start of the season, it looked very, very rosy. It looks very, very good. And as you move on to the season, we even get to like Australia, where Leclerc wins the race and is 40 points, I think over 40 points, might be 46 points. I'm not quite sure of the exact figures, but 40 plus points above Max Verstappen, to the point Max Verstappen even says, look, the title is over. We're not going to be fighting for the championship this season. We just got to move on. But yet, Max Verstappen wins the championship with 4 races to spare in the 2022 Formula One season. How on earth has that happened? Those two things don't make sense. They don't come together, do they? And bear this in mind as well for Ferrari fans out there. There was no dominant Mercedes either. So you've got to ask yourself, man, what on earth do they need? What needs to happen for Ferrari to win anything in Formula One again? Hindsight is 2020, but should they have put all the eggs in the Charles Leclerc basket? And listen, no disrespect to Carlos Sainz, who is a good driver, who's somebody who drove for my team, McLaren. However, you know, he wasn't obviously getting the race wins that Charles was. Charles had a ridiculous amount of poles, not many of them converting into wins. That's obviously going to be very, very questionable. The Ferrari car is fast. So what on earth is going on? Why were they so far away from winning the title this year? Either driver. Mahad, who is my McLaren brother, obviously at McLaren Fan TV, make sure you go check that out every Tuesday, mentioned that there's politics in Ferrari, that, you know, they seem to like Carlos Sainz more. In terms of the background, in terms of the technical team, the sort of the management side of things, they seem to like Carlos a bit more. Obviously, Charles is the faster driver, so it's a bit at the time anyway. And yeah, it's going to be it's Ferrari and politics. They're never too far away, are they? They're always round the corner from one another, and they're never too far away. But check this: Charles Leclerc in Formula One has got 18 poles and has won 5 races at the time of recording. It's the weekend of the US Grand Prix. Which Carlos Sainz has taken pole in. Race hasn't happened yet, but you know, it's one of those where you sort of think, what is happening here? Give me the juice. What's going on? What's the nitty gritty? What is the detail? Why are we having 5 wins in 18? Not good enough. There are so many people to look at in this situation. I think Ferrari as a team have had some part to blame. I think the management team in terms of strategists and people that are planning and sort of you know, preparing the race day, preparation for the race weekend, they've got the part to play. Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc themselves have also got a part to play. The engine as well has failed many, many times for them as well in the season. There is a mixture of everything, but I firmly believe that had they taken away the mistakes, both from the technical side as well as the driver's side, they would actually win the title this year. I know it sounds crazy, but I actually think they would win it this year. And bear in mind, they wrote off, what, 2020, 2021? They wrote off those seasons where they had major focus on this year. And listen, hats off to Ferrari. They built a superb car this year, right? Not necessarily all the way reliable, but they built a fast car nonetheless. And so hats off to them. They really did plug in and wait for this season. And, you know, it's the first opportunity where they've actually fought for a title, let's say, since 2019. And here we are. But let's look at the big picture here, right? Did Ferrari fail to reach expectation? Did they fail to win the title? Did they fail to fulfill, you know, what fans' expectations were, what the Ferrari fans' expectation was? I don't know going into the season whether they thought they were gonna win the title, but I definitely think they thought there's a chance we could be in a title race. Now, bear this in mind, before we even saw what Mercedes looked like, okay? You have to think Mercedes, Red Bull, right? Can Ferrari get in there? Can they get in that in between? Can they be a little sandwich, yeah, in between the two teams. And in fairness to them, they've done exactly that, right? They've got in between the Red Bull and the Mercedes. However, Mercedes have not appeared this season. We can't find them. It's an ABB looking out for Mercedes this year, because this year has been an absolute shambles by Mercedes standards, right? So really the fight was between Red Bull and Ferrari, and really in some cases, if not most cases, Ferrari looked better suited in races. Ferrari looked like they had the team ready, they had the car ready, they had the drivers ready. Everybody was there in place. But man, just one little error after error after error, little mini errors. And I'm talking about the start of the season, because obviously it's been a long season, right? But the start of the season, when you think about it, Red Bull was thinking, we've not built the right car here. We can't get a car to finish a race. How many failures were they having at the start of the season? And they managed to fix it up. And then in their upgrades as well, they become like the rocket launcher towards the end of the season. And it definitely looks, from a statistical point of view, and even when you watch some of the races, that Max Verstappen dominated the season this year. Wins the title with 4 races to spare, right? Fair enough. But we have to remember that Ferrari were once upon a time the lead in front of the championship season. It's difficult to say, did they fail to reach expectations? I think they failed to reach their own expectations. I personally think that Ferrari, Mattia Binotto, the crew, they all thought this year we can win the title, because they knew what car they had and not everybody else knew what was going on, right? And of course I don't think they knew obviously how Red Bull were going to fare and how Mercedes were going to fare and whatnot. But they knew. You look at the fact that they were battling with McLaren just the year prior, right? Finishing 3rd in the constructors, right? And then all of a sudden, off from the jump, they just absolutely rocket launched in towards the front of the grid. Fair play to them. So I think they failed to reach their own expectations. I don't think they failed to reach Ferrari fans' expectations, nor Formula One fans in general. I don't think they failed as such. But there's a lot of learning curve that's taking place this year. There's a lot of battle scars, a lot of battle wounds that Charles Leclerc and even Carlos Sainz will be learning from this season. And going into next season, I think they'll be much, much, much stronger. What I can rely on though is Ferrari making mistakes. I can always rely on it. I can always put my house on it. I can always bet on that happening. Because look at them. They haven't been serious for almost a decade, right? If not longer, okay? And look what they've had to provide. So the question also becomes as well, good Red Bull or bad Ferrari? And it's one of those questions where you can actually say bad Ferrari in my opinion, because yes, Red Bull were phenomenal. They've been amazing. They've been brilliant this year. But I don't think if we've got the best of Ferrari that we could get this year, they're not this far ahead, Red Bull, not by any stretch. And when you're much closer in the title race, little things can trigger and swing the other way. If Charles Leclerc picks up more race wins, picks up more points, Max Verstappen has less points, right, over the course of the season. So I definitely think that Ferrari, it's actually down to Ferrari more so why Red Bull and Max Verstappen, who credit to him, I'm not taking anything away from him. He dominated the season, let's be very clear. But the fact that Ferrari were just bottling after bottling after bottling gave the impetus for Red Bull to go ahead and absolutely destroy and crush and finish Ferrari off. But I think if we had the best Ferrari we could get this year, there's no way that this title is decided in Japan. You know what I'm saying? It could have even been done in Singapore. There's no way it could have been that way. Although it must be said, man, Red Bull won the title this year at a canter. Final question, are Ferrari that far off? Now, I don't think so at all. However, they've got to change personnel. They've got to do something about the strategists, whatever the word is, right? They've got to change the people who are planning these race weekends, because that is what is flopping their base week in, week out, okay? And you know, there's always going to be failures and mechanical failures and engine failures and so on and so forth, right? And you've got to get to that side of the equation. But when you look at the races, look how many pole positions they had this year and how many of them did they convert into wins. Ferrari are not far off at all. However, my only pump of the brake, excuse the pun, right, is where is Mercedes next year? Where will Mercedes be in 2023, okay? Because Ferrari needs to really buckle up. They cannot have any mistakes next year. They cannot afford to make any mistakes next year. Max Verstappen, I kid you not, was even making mistakes during the season where it didn't even matter. It didn't even matter anymore because they just knew that, look, he's the best driver on the grid. He's got the fastest car. They're the best team this year by a country mile. But they've got to nip their nonsense in the bud, and Ferrari will be well and truly in that hunt, in that fight. The only brake I will pump, where is Mercedes next season? That's the only question I have on that front. They've got the right drivers, okay? They've got the right car. They just need to, I guess the experience is what was lacking in terms of in a championship fight, but they're gaining that as we speak right now. Next year, they are without excuse. Ferrari need to be serious title challengers in Formula One in 2023. Otherwise, we might have another blowout Red Bull season, depending on how Mercedes recover. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Where do you think Ferrari have gone wrong this year? What next for Ferrari? Are they far off? Do you think it was good Red Bull or bad Ferrari, or was it a bit of both? Let me know in the comment section down below. With that said, people, lights out.